Now we're going to unwrap the railing. We're going to use the same process that we did for the electric pipes and the wires. Select the railing, assign UV grid texture material, and press Ctrl 1 to isolate select. I'm going to start with the top rail first, because I like to get the hardest one and the most time consuming one out of the way. Select it, and we're going to project on Y. And make sure to select the faces before you project, otherwise it doesn't seem to work. Next, we need to decide along which edges we want to make a cut. So we separate this one big UV shell into multiple UV shells. So switch over to Edge Component mode, and I'm going to select this edge ring, make a cut, then select this edge ring, make another cut, and we're going to select one more here on the bottom at the beginning of the stairs, and also make a cut. So now we have 4 different UV shells. And these 2 shells for the vertical rails, we will need to reproject. So select just these faces and project on X or Z. And do the same thing for the other vertical rail. Select these faces and project X or Z. Now we need to choose a single continuous edge where we want to have a texture seam, and so we can unfold each of these shells. And I'm going to choose this inner edge, which will run underneath the top rail and on the side here for the vertical rails. So double click on an edge. This will select the continuous edge loop, and then inside UV editor, make a cut. Switch over to UV component mode, double click on one of the UV shells to select all of its UVs, run unfold, and then straighten shell. If that doesn't straighten the shell completely, run straighten UVs with 45 degrees and both U and V enabled, and that should straighten the shell perfectly. Rotate the shell if you need to, set textile density, and move it out of the way. That is it. Same steps as we used before, and we're going to repeat this for all of the shells. Double click on the shell to select all of its UVs, run unfold, straighten shell. If that doesn't completely do it, use straighten UVs, rotate if you need to, set textile density, and move the shell out of the way. We have 2 more shells left, so let's run through these very quickly so we can move on to the other railings. Also, for these 2 vertical rail and shells, I'm going to stack them on top of each other. Even though they're not exactly the same, it will work perfectly fine in that case. Now, let's do the same thing for the other railings. Select this rail, select all of its faces, and project on Y. We'll need to make one cut to separate the shells, and it's going to be along this edge ring. Then double click on one edge where a texture seam is going to go. I'm going to choose one on the bottom and then cut along that edge. We only have 2 shells, so let's run unfold, straighten shell, straighten UVs, rotate the shell if you need to, set textile density, and move the shells outside 0 to 1 space. Now all we have left are the straight rails. We're going to do them one at a time, and by now you probably memorized this process that we've been using pretty much non-stop for the last few videos. For these straight rails, we're going to project on X, or you can project on Z instead of Y. Also, I don't need to use straighten UVs because straighten shell works perfectly. Select all the rails and begin to organize the UVs. I'm going to stack a few of the straight rail shells. So select the UV shells and choose stack shells. And I'm also going to stack the very long UV shells for the top and the middle rail, as well as the top and the middle corner rail. Let's bring everything back, Ctrl 1, select all the meshes in the scene, and position the rail UVs within our main temporary layout. And that's it. We are done with rail and UVs. One more thing I forgot to do. is let's select the rails and delete history.